Welcome, dear listener, to Story Time for Me, where we bring you soothing and immersive tales to transport you to magical worlds far, far away. Tonight, we invite you to step into the whimsical world of Wonderland, where time has slipped into chaos and only the brave Alice can restore balance. As you settle in and relax, let the enchanting melody guide you into the heart of this story. Follow Alice as she discovers a mysterious door in her garden that leads her to a vibrant and surreal world filled with talking flowers, eccentric tea parties, and labyrinthine puzzles. Will she find the key to time and restore order to Wonderland? Join us now as we embark on this wondrous adventure together. Let the story unfold. It was a bright summer morning when Alice ventured out into her overgrown garden. Dew glistened on the tangled foliage, and a chorus of birds sang a cheerful tune. With shears in hand, she aimed to reclaim her beloved garden from nature's encroachment. As she worked her way through the untamed edges, trimming bushes and cutting back ivy, her shears suddenly struck something hard. Frowning, Alice bent down and parted the thick curtain of leaves. There, behind the dense ivy, she uncovered an old wooden door. It stood alone, unattached to any wall or structure, and was intricately carved with swirling floral patterns that shimmered softly in the dappled sunlight. Strange and mysterious, the door seemed entirely out of place in her familiar garden. Alice knelt closer, tracing the swirling designs with her fingers. The wood was warm to the touch, pulsing gently with an otherworldly energy. The door beckoned her to explore further, and she couldn't ignore the tug of curiosity that bubbled within her. Compelled by the door's mysterious allure, Alice pushed aside the remaining foliage, revealing the full structure in its enigmatic glory. As she stood before the peculiar wooden door, she noticed a faint chill in the air around it, as if it held secrets from another world. She grasped the brass handle, worn smooth by time, and gently turned it. The mechanism clicked, and the door creaked open, revealing a soft, glowing light that spilled out onto the garden path. With a deep breath, Alice peered through the threshold, her eyes adjusting to the surreal landscape beyond. Vibrant colors swirled in the sky, painting an otherworldly canvas above the lush path that wound into the heart of this strange place. Flowers of every hue swayed gently in the breeze, whispering secrets to each other. Taking a hesitant step forward, Alice felt a rush of cool air wash over her. The ground beneath her shifted from the familiar cobbles of her garden path to a soft, moss-covered trail that stretched into the distance. The air was alive with the scent of strange blossoms, and a distant, melodic laughter floated on the breeze. Unable to resist the pull of the vibrant world beyond, Alice stepped fully through the doorway and into the unknown. As she turned back for a final glance at her serene garden, the door swung shut behind her with a gentle click, sealing off the ordinary world she knew. Ahead, the path twisted into a landscape of vivid greens and brilliant blues, beckoning her deeper into the heart of this enchanted realm. With cautious footsteps, Alice ventured along the trail, her senses alight with the sounds and smells of this new world. Bright flowers leaned in to greet her, and the leaves of the trees whispered softly as she passed. Above her, the swirling sky seemed to sing with the melody of an unseen orchestra. In the distance, a flicker of movement caught her eye. She squinted through the hazy light and saw a white rabbit, smartly dressed in a waistcoat and clutching a pocket watch. The rabbit glanced up, noticed Alice, and promptly dashed off down the path, his voice echoing back, "Oh dear, oh dear, I'm late." Curiosity piqued, Alice hurried after him, her own footsteps echoing in the stillness of this strange, surreal place. The adventure had begun. Alice darted down the winding, moss-covered path, her breath coming in short bursts as she tried to keep up with the white rabbit. The trail twisted and turned through a forest where the leaves were various shades of gold and emerald, and the air buzzed with the hum of unseen creatures. Ahead, she glimpsed flashes of the rabbit's white waistcoat as he hurried through the underbrush, occasionally glancing back with an anxious frown. After what felt like hours of pursuit, Alice finally stumbled into a clearing bathed in soft, dappled sunlight. She paused, catching her breath, and looked around in wonder. The clearing was a circular meadow, surrounded by towering trees with trunks of deep purple. In the center of the meadow stood a ring of flowers, each one swaying gently and murmuring among themselves. "Who's that?" whispered a scarlet tulip, craning its slender neck to peer at Alice. "A stranger, a stranger!" cried a daffodil, her yellow petals fluttering in excitement. The other flowers turned their faces toward Alice, whispering and giggling. Their voices rose and fell like the wind rustling through leaves. "Is she here to help?" murmured a rose with velvet red petals. "She must be," replied a lily, nodding sagely. "The rabbit brought her after all." Before Alice could respond, the white rabbit bounded into the clearing, still clutching his pocket watch. He skidded to a stop before her, ears twitching anxiously. "Oh dear! Oh dear!" the rabbit exclaimed, hopping from one foot to the other. I'm terribly late. Terribly, terribly late. Late for what? Asked Alice, looking down at him with concern. The rabbit paused and glanced up at her with wide, watery eyes. Why, the Queen's meeting, of course. The Queen will have my head if I don't find that key. What key? Alice asked, intrigued. The rabbit hopped closer, his nose twitching nervously. The key to time, he whispered. Without it, time in Wonderland is all wrong. Day bleeds into night, night into day, and everything's all muddled up. And you want me to help find this key? Alice asked, her curiosity now fully piqued. Oh, would you, miss? The rabbit implored, clasping his paws together. The Queen will be ever so grateful, and so will I. Alice looked around the clearing at the circle of talking flowers, their expectant faces turned towards her, and then down at the distressed rabbit before her. She could see how much this world meant to them, and she couldn't bear to leave them in such a state of distress. All right, she said, with a reassuring smile. I'll help you find the key to time. Oh, thank you, miss. Thank you, cried the rabbit, his ears twitching in relief. We must hurry, though. The Queen will be expecting us at the labyrinth. With that, the rabbit spun on his heels and dashed off again down the winding path. Alice followed close behind, her feet barely touching the mossy ground as she ran deeper into Wonderland. The winding path led Alice through groves of shimmering trees and over babbling brooks until she finally emerged into a sunlit glade. In the center of the clearing stood a long table set for tea, overflowing with mismatched cups, teapots, and plates piled high with pastries. Colorful bunting hung between the branches above, fluttering in the gentle breeze. At the head of the table sat a hare with twitching ears and wild eyes, drumming his fingers impatiently on a saucer. Beside him, a man in a towering hat fussed over a teapot, pouring streams of tea into a dozen cups at once. A dormouse snored quietly in a teacup nearby, oblivious to the chaos around him. As Alice approached cautiously, the hare looked up and waved frantically. "A guest! A guest!" he cried, hopping out of his chair. "Welcome to the tea party, my dear. Do come in and have a seat." The hatter glanced up, a manic grin spreading across his face. "Yes, yes. Do sit down. We've plenty of room, plenty of tea, and plenty of nonsense to go around." Alice hesitated for a moment, but found herself drawn to the eccentric hospitality of the hare and hatter. She took a seat beside the dormouse, who stirred briefly before falling back into a deep sleep. She took a seat beside the dormouse, who stirred briefly before falling back into a deep sleep. "I'm Alice," she said with a polite smile, hoping to make sense of the unusual gathering. Alice, you say? The hare replied, his nose twitching. Never heard of her. But we've heard of you now, the Hatter interjected, plopping a pile of sugar cubes into his tea. Have some tea? Thank you, Alice replied, as he placed a cup before her. Now tell us, my dear, the Hatter said, leaning forward with a mischievous gleam in his eye. Why is a raven like a writing desk? I'm not sure, Alice said thoughtfully, but I think you've asked me that riddle before. Have we? Asked the hare, scratching his head. Time's been behaving awfully strangely lately, so perhaps it only feels that way. Time. Oh, don't talk to me about time, cried the Hatter, throwing up his hands. Ever since that wretched queen threw me out of favor, I've been stuck at 6 o'clock. No time to do anything but drink tea and ask riddles. 6 o'clock? Alice asked, looking around at the numerous clocks scattered across the table. Each one had its hands frozen at 6. Always 6 o'clock, never 6:07, the Hatter declared with a dramatic flourish. It's the Queen's fault, I tell you, the hare muttered. And that blasted labyrinth. The labyrinth? Alice inquired, her interest piqued. Yes, yes, the Hatter exclaimed. The Queen's labyrinth, where all manner of riddles and puzzles lie in wait. But beware, those who enter might never find their way out. The labyrinth holds the key to time, the hare added solemnly. Only the bravest can solve its mysteries. Alice listened intently to the hare and Hatter's ramblings, picking out useful clues from the chaos. The labyrinth was guarded by puzzles and traps, each designed to confuse and mislead those who sought to pass. But the key to time was hidden somewhere within its twisting paths, and Alice was determined to find it. Where can I find the labyrinth? She asked. The Hatter grinned, lifting his teacup in a mock toast. Follow the winding path through the forest, he said, pointing with one hand while pouring more tea with the other. Look for the statues with backward spinning clocks. There lies the entrance. But be careful, warned the hare. The Queen won't be pleased to see you meddling in her affairs. Alice thanked them both for their hospitality and advice, then rose from the table. As she left the clearing, the Hatter called after her. Do hurry back for more tea, my dear. 6 o'clock comes around all too soon. With renewed determination, Alice set off along the winding path, seeking out the labyrinth and the key to time that would restore order to Wonderland. Alice wandered through the forest, her eyes scanning the trees for any sign of the labyrinth. The air grew cooler as she ventured further into the dense foliage, and a strange, otherworldly silence settled around her. Eventually, she came upon a clearing where 2 towering statues stood on either side of a twisted iron gate. The statues with faces etched in stone. Each had a backward spinning clock embedded in their chests, their hands ticking in reverse. Above the gate, an intricate archway bore a warning etched in ornate letters. To enter is to lose oneself, but to conquer is to master time. Beyond the gate lay a tangled maze of hedges, their tops rising high above Alice's head. As she hesitated at the threshold, the statues seemed to turn their stony gazes towards her, their clock faces glowing dimly in the twilight. Taking a deep breath, Alice pushed open the gate and stepped inside, the iron bars creaking shut behind her. The air inside the labyrinth was thick with the scent of damp earth and moss, and the high hedges towered over her like walls. Alice wandered cautiously along the narrow paths, her footsteps muffled by the soft grass beneath her feet. After a few minutes of winding through the maze's twists and turns, she came upon a clearing where a stone bench sat beneath a withered tree. On the bench perched a bird-like figure, dressed in a long coat, its feathers slicked back in neat rows. In one claw, it held a scroll, and in the other, a quill dipped in ink. "Ah, a visitor," croaked the bird, its beady eyes gleaming. "Welcome to the labyrinth of time." "Who are you?" Alice asked. "I am the keeper of riddles," the bird replied with a flourish. "And if you wish to pass, you must first answer my question." Alice stood before the keeper of riddles, her brow furrowed in concentration as he unfurled the scroll. "Tell me, Alice," he said, his voice low and gravelly, "what runs but never walks, has a mouth but never talks, has a bed but never sleeps, and has a head but never weeps?" Alice considered the riddle for a moment, tapping her chin thoughtfully. "A river," she answered finally, meeting the keeper's gaze. "Correct," the keeper cawed, snapping the scroll shut. "You may pass." The keeper of riddles rose from the bench, revealing a hidden path that led deeper into the labyrinth. Alice followed the winding trail, her resolve strengthened by the victory. As she ventured further, she encountered other enigmatic guardians and faced more puzzles, each one testing her wit and courage. She crossed bridges over swirling mists, solved riddles scrawled on ancient stones, and navigated through shifting paths that seemed to change with each step. With every challenge she conquered, the labyrinth revealed more of its mysteries. She learned that the maze was designed to confuse those who sought the key to time, to trap them in a web of indecision and fear. But Alice's determination never wavered, and she pressed on, her mind focused on the goal. In one corner of the labyrinth, she discovered a sundial etched with runes that glowed faintly in the moonlight. As she studied the markings, she realized they were clues pointing towards the labyrinth's heart, where the key to time lay hidden. With renewed purpose, Alice made her way towards the labyrinth's center. She navigated through corridors lined with mirrored walls, where her reflection seemed to mock her every misstep. She climbed stairs that spiraled endlessly upwards and solved puzzles that required both cunning and courage. Finally, she emerged into a grand clearing where a marble pedestal stood beneath a canopy of stars. On the pedestal lay a gleaming key, its surface engraved with intricate patterns that seemed to shift and shimmer in the moonlight. Alice stepped forward and carefully picked up the key, feeling its weight in her palm. As she held it up to the starlight, she knew she had found the key to time, the very thing that would restore order to Wonderland. With the key securely in her grasp, she turned back towards the labyrinth's entrance, ready to face the Queen and set things right once and for all. After navigating the labyrinth, Alice found herself on a path bathed in the soft glow of moonlight. The winding trail led her through a grove of silver-leafed trees until she stood before an arched doorway carved into the trunk of a massive oak. The door was ajar, and a warm, golden light spilled out onto the forest floor. Curious, she stepped inside and found herself in a grand library that stretched endlessly in every direction. Tall shelves towered above her, filled with books of every shape and size. The air was thick with the scent of old parchment and ink, and the only sounds were the faint rustling of pages and a distant, echoing whisper. As Alice wandered through the aisles, she noticed that the books seemed to whisper to one another, their voices soft and indistinct. She reached out and opened a small leather-bound volume. To her astonishment, the book spoke directly to her in a gentle, melodic voice. "Welcome, seeker of knowledge," it said. "Within these pages lie the secrets of the Midnight Library." Alice closed the book and glanced around. The shelves seemed to sway gently, as if beckoning her to explore further. She wandered deeper into the library, following the whispers of the books, until she reached a spiral staircase that wound its way up to a high balcony. At the top of the stairs, she found a cozy reading nook where a wise-looking owl perched on a wooden lectern. The owl adjusted his spectacles and peered down at her. "Ah, a visitor," the owl hooted, his feathers ruffling slightly. "It's been ages since we've had company." "Who are you?" Alice asked, stepping closer. "I am Archimedes, the librarian of the Midnight Library," he replied, his beady eyes twinkling. "What brings you to these halls?" "I'm looking for the key to time," Alice said, showing him the gleaming key she had found in the labyrinth. The owl tilted his head to one side, studying the key with interest. "Ah, the key to time," he said thoughtfully. "A most important artifact indeed. But this key alone cannot restore order to Wonderland." "What do you mean?" Alice asked. "The key must be used in conjunction with the clock of echoes, which lies hidden in the castle of time," Archimedes explained, spreading his wings and fluttering down from the lectern. He landed gracefully on a nearby table and began rummaging through a pile of scrolls and books. "Here it is," he said finally, unfurling a scroll and smoothing it out before Alice. The parchment was filled with intricate diagrams and detailed notes, all centered around a grand clock housed in a castle's tower. "The castle of time lies beyond the Valley of Echoes," Archimedes explained, tracing a path on the map with one wing. "But beware, the castle is guarded by echoes of the past and future. Only those who understand time's true nature can navigate its halls." "And how do I find the Valley of Echoes?" Alice asked. Archimedes hopped over to a nearby shelf and plucked out a large, dusty tome. He flipped through its pages until he found a map of Wonderland, with a winding path leading from the Midnight Library to the distant valley. "Follow the moonlit path through the silver woods," he said, pointing to the map. "It will lead you straight to the valley." Alice carefully studied the map, committing the path to memory. She then turned to Archimedes and asked, "What makes this key so important?" The owl adjusted his spectacles and settled back on the lectern. "The key to time was created by the clockmaker to ensure that time would always flow in perfect harmony throughout Wonderland," he explained. But when the Queen of Hearts seized control, she hid the key and threw Wonderland into disarray. "So if I find the Clock of Echoes and use the key, I can restore order to Wonderland?" Alice asked. "Precisely," Archimedes replied. "But you must act quickly. Time is slipping away, and the Queen's power grows stronger with each passing day." With a grateful smile, Alice rolled up the scroll and tucked it under her arm. "Thank you, Archimedes," she said. "I'll find the Castle of Time and set things right." "May wisdom guide your path," the owl hooted as Alice made her way back down the spiral staircase. She left the Midnight Library with renewed determination, the moonlit path to the Valley of Echoes stretching out before her. With the key and the map in hand, she knew she was one step closer to restoring balance to Wonderland. Guided by Archimedes' map, Alice followed the moonlit path through the silver woods, crossing streams and glades until she reached the Valley of Echoes. As she descended into the mist-covered valley, her footsteps echoed softly in the twilight, leading her towards a small cottage nestled at the base of a craggy hill. The cottage appeared unassuming from the outside, but as she approached, she noticed a glimmer of light shining through the windows. Alice pushed open the creaky wooden door and stepped inside. Her breath caught in her throat as she gazed around the room. The interior was a marvel of intricate clockwork devices and frozen timepieces, each one more elaborate than the last. Gears, springs, and pendulums filled every inch of the walls and ceiling, ticking away in perfect harmony. In the center of the workshop stood a towering grandfather clock, its hands frozen at midnight. Alice wandered through the maze of gears and cogs, marveling at the craftsmanship that surrounded her. She picked up a small, delicate pocket watch from a dusty shelf and examined it closely. The hands were stuck, unable to move past 12. "Beautiful, isn't it?" a voice said softly behind her. Startled, Alice spun around to find a ghostly figure standing before the grandfather clock. The figure wore a long coat and a bowler hat, his eyes hidden behind round spectacles. He studied Alice for a moment, then tipped his hat politely. "I am the clockmaker," he said with a weary smile. "Welcome to my workshop." "But you're—" Alice hesitated, unable to find the right words. "A ghost?" the clockmaker finished with a chuckle. "Yes, my dear, I suppose I am. My spirit lingers here, bound to this place by unfinished work." "What work?" Alice asked, intrigued. The clockmaker sighed and gestured to the frozen grandfather clock behind him. The Queen of Hearts seized control of Wonderland and shattered the key to time, throwing the land into chaos, he explained. "Without the key, my clocks can no longer function properly, and time stands still." He wandered over to a nearby workbench and picked up a small gear, turning it over in his translucent hands. "I tried to repair the key, but the Queen's magic prevented me from completing my task," he said sadly. "And now my workshop is frozen in time, just like the rest of Wonderland." "But I have the key to time," Alice said, holding up the gleaming key she had found in the labyrinth. The clockmaker's eyes widened in surprise. "The key to time," he exclaimed, reaching out to touch it. "You found it at last!" "But Archimedes said I need to use it with the clock of echoes in the castle of time," Alice said. The clockmaker nodded solemnly. "Yes, my dear. The Clock of Echoes is the only device capable of restoring time to Wonderland. But the castle is guarded by echoes of the past and future, and only the bravest can navigate its halls." Moved by the clockmaker's story, Alice placed her hand on his ghostly arm and said, "I promise I'll find the castle of time and use the key to restore order." The clockmaker's weary smile returned, and he tipped his hat once more. "Thank you, my dear. I have no doubt that you will succeed." He walked over to the workbench and picked up a small brass compass, handing it to Alice. "This compass will guide you through the Valley of Echoes and lead you to the Castle of Time. he said. But remember, time is not always as it seems. Alice took the compass gratefully and tucked it into her pocket. Thank you, she said. I won't let you down. May time be on your side, the clockmaker replied as he slowly faded into the shadows. With the compass in one hand and the key to time in the other, Alice left the workshop and ventured back into the Valley of Echoes. The mist swirled around her as she followed the compass needle north, her footsteps echoing through the valley. She was determined to find the castle of time and restore the flow of time to Wonderland, no matter what challenges lay ahead. Guided by the brass compass, Alice climbed the mist-shrouded hills until she stood atop a ridge overlooking the Valley of Echoes. Far below, perched on a rocky outcrop and surrounded by swirling mist, was the Castle of Time. Its turrets pierced the fog, and the moonlight cast long shadows across its weathered stone walls. As she descended into the valley, the echoes of past and future swirled around her like ghosts, whispering secrets and warnings into the cool night air. In the mist, she could hear faint laughter, the clinking of teacups, and the ticking of unseen clocks. The closer she came to the castle, the more the echoes seemed to blend together, creating a strange, ethereal symphony. The castle gates loomed before her, adorned with intricate carvings of gears and clock faces. Alice pushed them open and stepped inside. The courtyard beyond was bathed in moonlight, casting long shadows across the cobblestones. A series of archways led off in every direction, each one shrouded in mist. Alice took a hesitant step forward, but the echoes seemed to distort the very air around her, and the courtyard twisted and swayed like a hall of mirrors. Only those who understand time can pass, came a whisper from the mist. Determined, Alice reached into her pocket and pulled out the brass compass. The needle spun wildly for a moment before settling on a path to her left. She followed it through the mist, stepping carefully over the cobblestones until she came upon a stone pedestal engraved with symbols of the sun and moon. As she examined the pedestal, she noticed a series of dials and levers set into its base, each one marked with different phases of the moon. She turned the dials, aligning the moon phases to match the current night sky. The mist parted slightly, revealing a narrow archway that led into the castle's interior. Inside, the echoes grew louder, and the walls seemed to shimmer with visions of the past and future. Alice wandered through the twisting corridors, her footsteps echoing off the stone. She soon found herself in a vast hall where towering columns held up a ceiling painted with constellations. At the far end of the hall stood another pedestal, this one adorned with symbols of the seasons. Alice studied the markings carefully, then adjusted the levers to match the current season. As she did, the columns shifted, revealing a hidden passageway leading deeper into the castle. She wandered through endless halls and spiraling staircases, each one guarded by puzzles and riddles that twisted her sense of time and space. In one room, she had to arrange a series of paintings depicting different ages in chronological order. In another, she solved a maze etched into the floor that mirrored the labyrinth she had faced earlier. Finally, she emerged into a circular chamber where a clock tower loomed high above her. The chamber was filled with gears, pulleys, and pendulums that ticked and whirred in perfect harmony. In the center of the room stood a marble pedestal upon which the clock of echoes rested. The clock was a magnificent creation, its face adorned with swirling patterns that seemed to shift and shimmer with every tick of the pendulum. Beside the clock was a small keyhole, and Alice knew at once that this was where the key to time belonged. With a steady hand, she took the key to time from her pocket and inserted it into the keyhole. The clock whirred to life, and the gears around her began to turn. The pendulum swung slowly at first, then picked up speed, ticking away the seconds. As the clock chimed, the room filled with a brilliant golden light, and Alice felt the very fabric of time shift around her. The echoes faded away, and the mist lifted, revealing a clear night sky above the tower. The clock of echoes stood before her, ticking steadily as the gears around it hummed in perfect harmony. With the key now in place, time flowed naturally once more. Alice looked up at the clock tower and smiled. She had succeeded in restoring time to Wonderland, and the Queen of Hearts would no longer hold power over the land. But her journey was not yet over. She still had to return to the Queen and ensure that Wonderland remained at peace. With renewed determination, she turned back towards the castle gates and made her way down the mist-shrouded path. The golden glow of the clock of echoes illuminating her way. The mist cleared as Alice left the castle of echoes and made her way through the valley of echoes, the moonlit path stretching before her. The winding trail led her back through the silver woods, across glades and streams, and finally to a meadow where the festival of time was already in full swing. Colorful lanterns hung from the trees, casting warm light on the revelers below. Long tables were set with cups and teapots, and platters overflowed with cakes and pastries. Music filled the air as a band of rabbits, squirrels, and hedgehogs played jaunty tunes on fiddles and drums. At the center of the festivities stood a large clock tower, its hands ticking steadily towards midnight. The crowd cheered as Alice entered the meadow, their faces lit with joy and relief. The White Rabbit, still clutching his pocket watch, hurried over to greet her. "You did it, Alice!" he cried, his ears twitching with excitement. "You've brought back the key to time." "Welcome back, my dear," called the Hatter from his place at the tea table. "We saved you a cup." The Hare waved enthusiastically from beside the Hatter, while the Dormouse stirred briefly in his teacup before drifting back to sleep. Even the flowers leaned closer to catch a glimpse of Alice, their petals swaying gently in the breeze. "Thank you all," Alice said with a smile, "but there's still one more thing to do." As she wandered through the festival, Alice reflected on the trials she had faced and the bonds she had forged along the way. She thought of the keeper of riddles in the labyrinth, the wise owl Archimedes in the midnight library, and the clockmaker's spirit in the workshop. Each had helped her understand the importance of time and the need to restore balance to Wonderland. She remembered the puzzles she had solved in the Castle of Echoes and the echoes of past and future that had guided her path. It had been a long journey, filled with riddles and trials, but she had never wavered in her resolve to set things right. Now, standing among her friends at the Festival of Time, she felt a deep sense of gratitude and accomplishment. The revelers danced and sang around her, their faces bright with hope, and she knew that her journey had been worth every challenge. "Well done, Alice," said the Hatter, tipping his hat with a grin. "You've brought us all back to our senses." "But will the Queen accept the key to time?" the Hare asked nervously, twitching his nose. "She must," replied the Rabbit firmly. "Time must be restored." "And she will," Alice added with confidence. "I'm sure of it." As the festival drew to a close and the clock tower struck midnight, Alice made her way to the stage at the center of the meadow. The revelers gathered around her, and the White Rabbit stepped forward, holding a velvet cushion upon which the key to time rested. "Friends," Alice said, raising her voice above the music, "I have found the key to time, and with it, we shall restore balance to Wonderland." A cheer rose up from the crowd, and the Hatter waved his teacup in the air. 3 cheers for Alice. "Hip, hip, hooray!" cried the Hare, while the Dormouse mumbled sleepily in his cup. Alice took the key from the velvet cushion and held it up to the moonlight. The intricate patterns engraved on its surface shimmered in the soft glow, and she felt a warmth spread through her hand. "Now, let's return the key to its pedestal," she said with determination. With the White Rabbit leading the way, she made her way through the meadow and along the moonlit path to the garden where the mysterious door stood. The revelers followed close behind, their lanterns lighting up the night as they marched together towards the heart of Wonderland. Alice knew that once the key was back in its rightful place, the flow of time would be restored, and Wonderland would once again be at peace. The final act awaited her, and she was ready to see it through. The garden was bathed in the soft light of dawn as Alice and the revelers arrived, their lanterns flickering out one by one in the morning breeze. Before them stood the mysterious wooden door that had first drawn Alice into Wonderland, its intricate carvings glowing with a gentle, otherworldly light. The White Rabbit stepped forward, producing a silver keychain from his waistcoat pocket and offering it to Alice with a trembling paw. "The pedestal lies just beyond this door," he said softly. "The key to time will fit perfectly." Alice took the chain and carefully slid the key to time into the lock. She felt a faint click as the mechanism turned and the door swung open, revealing a circular clearing filled with wildflowers and a tall marble pedestal at its center. As she stepped through the door, the crowd of Wonderland's inhabitants followed, gathering around her in a ring of eager anticipation. Alice approached the pedestal, and with a steady hand, she placed the key to time into the small keyhole at its crown. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, the key began to turn, and the marble pedestal hummed softly as gears shifted beneath the surface. The wildflowers surrounding them swayed gently, and a cool breeze stirred through the clearing. The hum grew louder, and the pedestal glowed with a brilliant golden light, illuminating the faces of the crowd. The marble cracked open to reveal a clock mechanism underneath, and as the gears clicked into place, the clock hands began to spin, ticking steadily in perfect harmony. Time had been restored. As the clearing filled with golden light, the garden around them seemed to bloom anew. The wildflowers burst into vibrant colors, and the trees swayed with the rhythm of a gentle breeze. The sky above them brightened, and the first rays of sunlight broke through the canopy, casting long shadows across the meadow. The inhabitants of Wonderland cheered as the clock struck midnight, their voices echoing through the forest. The hare danced with the hatter, and the dormouse stirred in his teacup, mumbling drowsily about 6 o'clock tea. The White Rabbit clutched his pocket watch, tears streaming down his furry cheeks. "Time flows once more," he cried, holding up his watch for all to see. "All hail Alice, the restorer of time." The crowd erupted into applause, and the flowers bowed their heads in gratitude. The owl Archimedes flew down from the treetops, landing gracefully beside Alice. "Well done, my dear," he hooted warmly. "You have restored balance to Wonderland." The keeper of riddles appeared from the mist, nodding approvingly as he presented Alice with a small scroll. "A token of our gratitude," he said, "for solving our puzzles and bringing peace to the labyrinth." The clockmaker's spirit shimmered faintly at the edge of the clearing, his translucent form smiling down at Alice. "Thank you," he whispered, tipping his hat before fading away. Even the Queen of Hearts, who had remained conspicuously absent during the festival, appeared from behind a tree, her regal attire draped in scarlet velvet. She approached Alice with a graceful nod. "I must admit, my dear, that I underestimated you," she said softly. "You have done a great service to Wonderland, and for that, I thank you." "Does that mean no more off with their heads?" asked the Hatter, peering suspiciously over his teacup. "No more off with their heads," the Queen replied, though a mischievous smile twitched at the corner of her lips. The revelers laughed and danced in the clearing, celebrating the return of time to their world. But as the morning light grew stronger, Alice knew it was time to say goodbye. She stepped back through the marble archway, followed closely by the White Rabbit, the Hatter, and the Hare. They gathered around the mysterious door in the garden, the air thick with unspoken goodbyes. "I'll miss you all," Alice said, her voice filled with emotion. "You'll always have a place at our tea table," the Hatter replied, tipping his hat. "And I'll save you a seat at the festival," the Hare added, twitching his nose. "Be sure to visit again soon," the White Rabbit said, dabbing his eyes with a silk handkerchief. Alice embraced each of them in turn, holding the flowers close and exchanging knowing nods with Archimedes perched in a nearby tree. She glanced back at the Queen of Hearts, who gave a slight nod of approval and then turned towards the wooden door. With a deep breath, she stepped through, the mysterious carvings glowing softly as she closed the door behind her. When she opened her eyes again, she was back in her familiar garden, the morning sun streaming through the leaves and the dew glistening on the grass. The wooden door was still there, half hidden behind a thick curtain of ivy. But the carvings had faded, and it stood quietly as if waiting for another visitor. Alice looked around at the wildflowers and the neatly trimmed hedges. She felt a warmth spread through her chest as she remembered the friends she had made and the adventures she had experienced. Though she was back in her own world, she knew she would always carry a piece of Wonderland with her. With a smile, she picked up her shears and continued tending to the garden, her thoughts drifting back to the swirling mist and the ticking clocks. Wonderland was at peace once more, and she was forever changed by the journey. And so, dear listener, the tale of Alice's adventure in Wonderland draws to a close. She ventured through a labyrinth of riddles, navigated a castle of echoes, and brought peace to the whimsical world beyond the mysterious garden door. But as Alice returned to her garden, forever changed by the journey, she knew that Wonderland would always hold a special place in her heart. We hope this story has brought a little magic into your evening and that you leave Wonderland with a smile, knowing that even in the strangest of worlds, courage and kindness can conquer all. If you enjoyed this journey, please consider subscribing to Storytime for Me and joining us on future adventures filled with whimsy and wonder. Until next time, sweet dreams and good night.